Hey bike farmers, thanks for clicking in. So what we've got here is my 1996 Rivendell All-Rounder. I know I say this about all my bikes, but I think this is the coolest bike I have. I don't know, all my bikes are super cool, but this one is really special to me. This is the bike I've been using for touring, but it's built with very, very thin-walled, lightweight Reynolds 753 tubing. Now I think it's really cool that in the beginning of Rivendell, Grant Peterson wanted to continue to develop the Bridgestone X01, and the All-Rounder is that bike. Essentially, it's a road bike built on the 26-inch mountain bike platform. So the geometry is pretty goofy on it. I've got Rene Arce Rat Trap Pass 26 by 2.3 inch tires on it. These things float like a butterfly. This bike stings like a bee. However, due to the very thin tubing, it doesn't make the best touring bike. When I've got this thing loaded down, and if I get off the road, or even when I'm flying down hills, it gets a little noodly. Many of you probably watched the video of me riding in the Black Hills, and this is the bike that I did that ride on. And it was fine, I got through it, but when I got off on that horse trail, I think if you listen closely, I even mention it. I don't know, I just felt like I was stressing it and felt like I was gonna break something, and it just wasn't doing what I needed it to. So at that moment, I made up my mind that I'm gonna build an exact replica of this bike, only with oversized mountain bike tubing. So that's exactly what I did. I ordered a tube set and a bunch of lugs. I had some really cool Zeus 2000 rear dropouts sitting in a box that I found. It's not a whole lot I'm gonna change. I have decided that I'm gonna increase the rake on the fork. Let's see if I lift this up. You can see this is a very, very sexy fork with this really subtle bend. I'm gonna give it more of a French bend and kick it out. So this is a 38 millimeter rake. I'm gonna kick it out to 45. So I'm actually subtracting 7 millimeters of trail. That should help the bike handle a little bit better when I've got a front load. I'm gonna put some bags up front and a bag on the front rack. I think this is gonna be my main gravel bike after that. So I'm gonna take these fenders off. I'm gonna take this front rack off. I'm gonna keep this bag on here. I might take the bag off for now, but it's gonna go back on the bike just because it looks so cool. But I'm gonna kind of strip this thing down. I don't know if I'm gonna strip it all the way to the frame. It would help to have the frame up in a stand so I can measure things and make sure that I get my build right. But I've done a pretty good job of redesigning this bike. I went back to the original Rivendell readers. I think it was Rivendell reader number 2. And I found the page with the geometry chart for this all-rounder. I plugged all that into BikeCAD and designed the bike. I've got a nice digital drawing of it. And with that drawing, I can make a full-size drawing. So this video is gonna be about me making that drawing, taking this bike apart a little bit, and setting up the jig to get started on the build. So this is just the very beginning, first steps, like when you're thinking about building a bike, the planning, all of the effort that goes into designing the bike before you start mitering tubes and tacking things into place. I'm by no means a professional frame builder. I'm a hobbyist level frame builder at best. This will be my 3rd complete bike, my 5th attempt at a frame. I make a lot of mistakes. I learn as I go. This is a big undertaking for me. It's always a big undertaking for me to build a frame. So sit back, relax, and come along for the ride. Get my lock off of here. Love these locks. Disconnect the brakes and pop the wheels off. I think these super fancy Rene Arce fenders have to go first. Take those off. I think they're gonna go on the new bike. All right, I gotta take my little problem solver bow tie guys off here. Go. So this bike wasn't really set up to be taking a front rack or at least hauling a front load. It's got a pretty high trail, and I just don't think that I'm going to be carrying a front bag on it anymore, so I'm taking the front rack off. I'm hoping to build a custom rack for the new bike. Got all the stuff for it. We'll see, but this one would certainly do if I don't get around to it or I mess it up. Never done a rack. Hold all the hardware together so we don't lose it. If I don't have the front rack, I don't need the decalure, so we'll try to get that off. Oh yeah, these cables are really short. Oh, of course, the Technomic stem, very long stem. I'm gonna need a spacer. All right, I couldn't find a keyed one, but I found an unkeyed one. I'm gonna put it in between the keyed ones. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's what I'm doing. Why not? All right, that simplifies things quite a bit. Get this bike back into its more natural state as a lightweight all-rounder. Certainly look cool with the fenders on it, but I think it almost looks cooler without. It just looks sportier. Well, as long as I don't have to stay overnight and the weather ain't too bad, that's a pretty spry gravel bike. Now that we've got all of the touring bits off of it. Here I have the original order for that bike right there, so we know it's from 1996, so that's pretty cool. And then I got it October 27th 2019, so I've had it about 4 years. Okay, but with a different bike came this stack. Those are all of the Rivendell readers, and it's pretty complete. It looks like Rivendell reader. I'm gonna open this up because I have my geometry chart there. Oh, hi Moon. So this is photocopy, volume 0, issue 0, and this is Grant explaining how he's launching Rivendell after the closure of Bridgestone America. Anyway, here's everything from Rivendell Reader number 2. Very early days. And this is a lot about what that bike is, because I think this is 1994. But anyway, that's everything I need to know to build my frame, right there. So, the bottom bracket drop, 45. I was right. Confirmed. Oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna ever be able to do that. Look at those little hearts. Oh, cute. Okay, so here we are with the frame jig. This is a Henry James frame jig. They don't make these anymore. It's a little bit outdated. I think there's ways to adapt it more for modern frames, but it's really good for building like classic frames, you know, classic lugged frames, 135 millimeter spacing. I don't know if you can do the 142s and through axles and all that stuff. Might get a little more difficult with this. You could probably pull it off, but like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing. I barely know how to use this jig. You know, I managed to build a couple frames on it. I know just enough to be dangerous. Some of the basic things we're concerned with right now is the head tube angle. So there's a little protractor right here and you can adjust the head tube angle. So the head tube goes right on here. So from our bike CAD file and drawing, we know how long the head tube needs to be. So we can cut that and put that in there. That's an easy one. It's just a straight cut. And so we can get that set up pretty quickly. Bottom bracket goes down here and that can kind of be a little tricky to get it centered and that sort of thing. But this point never moves. This is a fixed point. So the center of the bottom bracket, everything kind of gets built off of there. And we've got this big old protractor guy here that fits on it, and then, well, if we loosen it up, everything kind of slides and you can get your angles this way too. So once we find our 72-degree seat tube, then we kind of know the horizontal tube, the top tube, and get those lugs set. And you know, once you get everything measured that way, you can set your brackets to kind of get it in the rough position and start cutting tubes to length. Now what I like to do is mock up the whole front triangle, get all the miters cut and that sort of thing. Make sure you get a good fit on everything before you start tacking in those first few tubes and building that front triangle. So I think that's what we'll start with. We'll get the bottom bracket in here, get the head tube cut, and then start getting angles and things set up and maybe mock up a few tubes. I have some scrap tubes. Sometimes I like to do that just to kind of get things close and just start dialing in the setup of the jig before we actually start hacking our real tubes and making some miters. So I just had a frame in here from a botched project that we're not going to talk about anymore. And so I think that this is actually in a really good spot. Should be the same bottom bracket shell. And they're just kind of wedges that are held in there. I'd like this bolt to be accessible from over here. So it's just kind of press fit in there and then tighten it down. And so it's not going to move one way or the other, but you can still kind of twist it. Another fairly easy thing we can do to set up real quick, we can get the rear axle spacing set up. Zero this guy out and measure. All right, and we're at 133 So that's really close. We want it 135. I think this, yeah, this screwdriver works. It's just a quick adjustment there. Measure it one more time. It's 133 or 134. Try that. 135.2. It's got a little bit of a wiggle to it. Close enough. And then we'll dial these in a bit. These are the dropouts I'm using. These are cool old vintage Zeus dropouts. I don't think I've ever seen a pair. They're Googleable. They're not that rare, but certainly a unique thing to this bike. Nobody's got Spanish dropouts on their adventure bike. Nobody but the bike farmer, at least. And then we'll set our bottom bracket drop, which on this bike is gonna be a whopping 45 millimeters. According to my drawing. So there's a little groove right here and then a gauge, and that is set at 45. So that's the bottom bracket drop, which means from the center of the rear axle to the center of the bottom bracket, there is a 45 millimeter drop in the bottom bracket. So from the center of the rear axle to the center of the bottom bracket is a 45 millimeter drop. Vertical drop. Okay. And we can set our chainstay. So the chainstay length is here, horizontal distance from the BB center to the rear axle. For some reason, I don't trust this one. So I'm gonna measure it manually as well, but I'm gonna go off the gauge to get started. And we want this to be 42 and a half. Which I'm showing is right there, if that's actually my mark. Like I said, I don't really even know how to use this thing, but it's good enough for who it's for. So this is the distance we're gonna measure. Go from the center of that bolt to there. Yeah, so if I measure like that, I mean, it's close, but not quite. It's measuring like 43. What if I do center there? Yeah, it's probably right. Pretty close. We'll double check that as we go too. We might find some clues along the way. Okay, we're gonna make some, back this up a little bit here. Take the bottom bracket out. Play with this thing a little bit. So, let's see if I can make sense out of this. I'm gonna go with, I think it's 58 and a half. So that's 58 and a half from the center of the bottom bracket to the center top tube. And then we gotta set the angle here is 72. I'll double check my drawing quick. Yep, 58 and a half. Yeah, it looks like center to center. So we'll take this off for now. I'm gonna take all these red guys off. There you can see right on the 0, I'm at 72 degrees. And here, we're aligned with 58 and a half. Well, let's see here, see if I can get better light. I might have to make a little micro adjustment there. All right, so now put our jig in here. A little bit of futzing and finagling. You can rest your top tube on that. And then your seat tube angle should be right there. Kind of get things as perpendicular as possible here. I think that's getting closer. Okay, seems about right. Okay, over here on the drawing, we've got our head tube. And that's our head tube. You can see it's way bigger than it needs to be. And then I'm just gonna kind of double check the drawing just to be sure. I'm kind of eyeballing the lugs here, making sure that I'm going from the right lines. Things are gonna pan out for me. I can always face it down a little bit. So I wanna cut it just a tad big, but that's where those go. So my lines are fairly accurate. And so I'll line that up, and I'm measuring. If I add a little bit to either side, I mean 120. Nope, that's not right at all. 200 millimeters is gonna give us a good millimeter or two on either side to face down at the end. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go with 200 millimeters. Plenty of head tube left over if we mess it all up. I'm gonna mark right on 200. So, I gotta find my mark. Get this in here. Get my saw guide. I think that's pretty good. I take the easy way. Yeah, it's right on the money. Right on the mark. Okay, go clean that up. Ooh, fits like a glove. Like I said, I have some extra tubes and kind of things sort of aligned. How about we do this? Lock it down that way. So this whole thingamajobber goes up and down, right? We know this flat right here is gonna rest our top tube from our big protractor guy. All right, so we can slide a dummy top tube into that lug. We know from the big protractor guy, it lines up in that lug. Now we still have to, miter that. We got to make a miter cut so it mates up really nice with the head tube inside there. At least for setting up the jig, you can get pretty close. Actually, I think it's got to come down just a smidge. All right, I got my head tube floating in space vertically in the right spot. We're still not sure about the horizontal distance. I think I've got a front center measurement back here, I just noticed. I might need to look up what the front center of this bike is gonna be. The front center is I'm gonna get this wrong. The front center is vertically from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of this intersection, or where these two intersect, I believe. But we have the same diameter, so why doesn't that work? We have the same diameter top tube and seat tube, so we can use this as a dummy tube, but that's not working. That doesn't work. How come? Okie dokie, we're gonna try a different approach here. I'm gonna pull this off even though I think it's in the right spot. Not hard to figure out. And then I thought these were kind of in the right spot too, but I'm thinking not. So try a totally different approach. So these I think I can just loosen up. I've got my protractor set here. And if I take everything off, it'll sit flat on the jig, okay? Something like that maybe. We'll get there eventually. See what happens there. Seems a little better. Yeah, that's way closer. All right, now we have to make some tweaks over here, I think. Loosen these guys. Okay, I'm not gonna move the red ones now. Just gonna loosen the black ones to get this tube out. And this, I think, is gonna be an approximation. That will dial in a little bit later, or at some point, I should say. Okay, I think we got that figured out. So 72 degrees. We'll get this, the down tube is a little less important than the rest. And we just got to make the measurement across here as well, 585. Okay, so I got the seat tube back in here and then just kind of eyeball measured up to about 57 is center to center. And then the drawing says from center at that junction to over here, it should be 585, and I'm measuring 575 or 570. So this all needs to come straight over, which is the front center adjustment, which I haven't looked up yet, and I will go look up. But I'm just gonna kind of eyeball guess it here for a minute, see how close we get. Again, I don't even fully understand this measurement. It might need a little persuasion. Okay, center of that tube to center of there. It's getting there, just a little bit more. And then we'll check it against the drawing here in a minute. Center, 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 that looks really good. That's gonna be super close. Well, that just moved it. We'll see how we do here. I'm gonna tighten things down just in case we're right on. Try it one more time here. I think it's gotta move a little bit. All right, I'm gonna go give it a check. All right, trying a different approach with the protractor. This is not good content. All right, so, okay, here it is. Finally figured it out. I don't know how to explain it, but these curves right here, the very center of these curves are in line with those brackets. So you can put your tube in there and hold it flat and align these guys to it. And then these will come down and hold that tube out in space, and all the tubes will be at the same plane. I hope I explained that right. It took me that long to figure it out. Right now, things seem to be fairly good. I think I need to move this back down. So we need that to line up. This measurement right on 585, and this should be 57, and it is. We are good to go. We got 73, 72, everything's tight. Don't worry about the down tube now. 61-ish. Go check the drawing. All right, after some serious futzing around with this thing, I figured out how it all works, I believe. And this guy goes like this. Okay, so I set the seat tube angle at 72 degrees using this top edge as a reference point. Then I took this and I lowered it down until I'm measuring 57 millimeters center to center here. I double checked that, I made a mark and double checked that with my tape, and that all checks out. And then the other important measurement, as we all know, aside from this one, so that's 57, this is 58 and a half. I still don't know what the numbers back here mean. I don't know if it's front, back, or reach, or whatever. It corresponds to the head tube angle, I think. I looked at the drawing, I couldn't figure it out. Made a couple other marks and checked it on the drawing, and this is now set. So 73 degrees, 72 degrees, 570 millimeters, but 57, 58 and a half. Don't really care about the down tube at this point, although it's supposed to be 62 from here to the center, which is going to be really close, I believe. Yeah, it's going to be really close. So I think we're okay there. I got the height. I can figure that out here with the lug in place. As long as that slides in there nice and clean, that means this is in the right place. I'm gonna trust this measurement. So this is 45 degree bottom, or 45 millimeter bottom bracket drop, and then we've got 425 chain stays. And that's kind of relative. Seems a little long right now, but I have horizontal dropouts. So, you know, you kind of want them right in the middle, I think, of that number. And so that'll be close. But all we're concerned about now is the front triangle. So I think the very first step is I'm gonna get this mitered into place, maybe. And one cool way you can do it with lugged frames is just put the tube in there and take a Sharpie and mark it from the inside of the lug and then miter it down from there. I might do that. I don't know which one I'm gonna do first yet. I'll have to think about that. So I think now we're ready to miter a tube or two and start assembling this thing. You know, start mocking it up in the frame. So here we go.